Hi, welcome back to another edition of Max and Nicky 1000th Time Reactions.
On this episode, we're going to be listening to Rio by Duran Duran.
This will be our 1000th time listening to this song.
That's right, Nicky.
In secret, this is probably our, 5,000th time listening to the song.
Well, actually, the secret's out. This is not really a secret anymore.
But for all intents and purposes, we're going to call it our 1,000th time listening to the song.
Sure.
Before we get started, just want to remind you all, like I usually do, that we have another channel called Max and Nicky, on which we perform oldies, tunes, jazz standards, and songs in that vein.
And we got some comedy videos on there as well. But for now, let's listen to Rio by Duran Duran
for our 1,000th time.
Here we go.
Keep note of this.
Moving on the floor now, babe, you're a bird of paradise. Cherry ice cream smile, I suppose it's very nice. With a step to your left and a flick to the right, you catch that mirror way out west. You know you're something special and you look like you're the best. Her name is Rio and she dances on the sand, just like that river twisting through a dusty land. And when she shines, she really shows you all she can. Oh, Rio, Rio, dance across the Rio Grande. I've seen you on the beach, and I've seen you on TV. To all the billion stars, it means so much to me, like a birthday or a pretty view. But then I'm sure that you know it's just for you. Her name is Rio and she dances on the sand, just like that river twisting through a dusty land. And when she shines, she really shows you all she can. Oh, Rio, Rio, dance across the Rio Grande. Hey now, woo, look at that, getting nearly
That's a jam right there.
Boy, that just really makes you move, that song. I mean, that's a dance song right there.
And that's really what, British new wave music really was at, especially in the early 80s. It was a combination of disco and
kind of this post-punk
and funk
feel and
vibes in there too. And
yeah, I mean, and synth, obviously,
but
synthesizer had a lot to do with
it.
It
all
80s,
combined
course,
to create this new pop sound in the 80s,
Right. I mean,
first of all, the bass line played by
on
John
this-
Taylor.
yeah,
who
and he's
is-
influenced by disco basses.
Sure, he's very influenced by Chic. Let's see, I think it's Bernard Edwards was the bassist, right, of Chic, if I'm not mistaken. Let's see, there's Nile Rodgers.
Nile Rodgers, who was in
the
Chic, who
guitarist.
happened to also produce Duran Duran.
Well, not all of their stuff.
Not all of their stuff, but some of their stuff,
Well,
though.
their initial collaboration was he did a remix of the song "The Reflex,"
Right.
Because they weren't happy with their album release of that song, and he really changed everything. And they released it as a single, the remix, and then he produced the Notorious album. But anyway, that's neither here nor there.
But in any event,
but Tony Thompson also was worked with them. Tony Thompson was the drummer for Power Station, which was kind of a side project for John Taylor. And anyway, I'm going off.
Anyway, this song just has so much going on in it. I mean, there's so many like sound effects in it.
Sure. Even from the get-go, there's like this. It starts off with
kind
this
of
sort of
swell,
or
this
of
kind
a
of this sort of
synth
sort of
swell.
synth sound effect going on,
like
and it kind of goes. It does this panning effect,
and then there's these sort of keyboard
this
synths
kind of
start getting like
dissonant,
cacophonous
this cacophony, dissonant kind of keyboard thing going on, which is really cool. And
it all leads into like the main beat of the song, which is kind of very moving, driving song.
Sure.
And that bass played by John Taylor is very, very good.
Sure.
He's I think he's getting a little bit more respect now as these days as being like a very accomplished and just very
well-respected
very
drummer.
Very respected.
I mean,
bassist.
bassist rather. Sorry.
The drummer is actually Roger Taylor,
Right.
not to be confused with another famous drummer, Roger Taylor, who was the drummer for Queen.
Right.
Isn't that funny, by the way, that two Roger Taylors were both drummers?
Right, but by the way, the band itself, Duran Duran, are finally getting the respect that they should have, that the fans have always gave them,
because they were never they were never
critics
like the critic darlings that maybe the Smiths were, even though we loved the Smiths. But because Duran Duran, they were also
pop.
But they weren't just about. I mean, they were a lot of it was about music, but they also were about being very fashion
They were
forward
very fashionable,
and they
their
wanted
music videos were really very expensive.
No, they weren't expensive.
They were. I think "Hungry Like the Wolf" actually, I think at the time was the most expensive music video to be.
Well,
made.
it was more like they were. Or
it might have been Rio. Or
they
one of
knew
those.
what. They knew what they had to do in the '80s to be at the forefront of popular music, and they did that.
But here's another thing. As I said, though, they are now getting the respect that they should have been getting all along, and they are getting inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Actually, this
purely
year,
because
right?
of the fan vote.
Because of the fan votes, yeah, right.
Which is pretty cool. But it's funny. All the Taylors on this in the original lineup, Andy Taylor, Roger Taylor, and John Taylor, they're all really good musicians. And Nick Rhodes on the synths and keyboards, he really adds a lot of cool extra sound effects.
I mean, there are a lot of sound effects going on here that are really
and obviously
neat.
Simon Le Bon is a great front man for this band.
Sure, but also that sax solo is a mean sax solo.
Sure,
there too.
sure.
Is it just a session musician that's playing sax?
I would assume so.
Yeah.
I might, yeah.
But man, it really adds a lot. You know? And then also in the background, you have this guitar during the choruses. You have this guitar that's going on in the background, which is really neat. It's just
Andy Taylor, man, he's a very good guitarist.
It adds this kind of, it helps create the atmosphere of this song.
These guys are really good musicians, as opposed
really
to,
good.
there were a lot of purely synth bands in the 80s that were also part of the new wave movement. And, often there weren't real instruments played on the tracks. Like Depeche Mode in the beginnings, they were almost all synthesizers being used, or like a New Order. But Duran Duran were different. They were a pop band that, for the most part, they played their own instruments, real instruments, and obviously
there were a lot of pop bands that played their
they
own
augmented that with a synthesizer sound to create something very unique. I think that was unto them,
Right, but again, this is a groovin' dance song for sure.
Sure.
And you can see why. I mean, part of what made them so big was that I'm sure that it was played at the clubs a lot.
Sure.
As were their music. I mean, that's actually, I think, how they built a fan base at first was.
Well, Girls on Film.
Was. It wasn't play. It was that music video for it was played in the clubs actually because
Sure.
I think it was kind
very
of
risque.
Risque. I don't think it was actually.
I think
allowed
it
to be
actually
played
was
on-
censored when it was first aired on TV, like on
Sure.
MTV. But
Yeah. But it got a lot of.
anyway, we're not talking about Girls on Film right now. We're talking about
sure,
Rio, right?
Sure. Just an interesting note: the cover for this album, Rio, has this picture, has this interesting art of this woman with lipstick, and that picture of that woman influenced the way the women in the Robert Palmer music videos would look. Actually,
Sure. Actually, that art is specifically done by.
I forgot the name of the guy.
I'm forgetting the name of the guy who did it, but his the way he passed away was very kind of it was sad, but also it was kind of an ironic passing, actually. But look into it. I
Right.
can't Nagel.
I can't remember.
Oh God, I think it's like Philip Nagel or something like
anyway,
that.
let's just say that
That's the guy's name.
His art, though, I think maybe because of this album, but I think in other things too, influenced fashion in the 80s.
Sure.
Isn't that interesting?
Anyway, I think that'll do it for this reaction. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and ding that post notification bell to find out about more Max and Nicky reaction videos.
And keep tuning in.